Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to day 2 of week 2 of the 2025 Reimagining and Improving Student Education, or RISE Committee negotiated rulemaking session. We are going to start right in with taking attendance. To make that a little easier, I will do a roll call. We'll start with legal assistance organizations that represent students and borrowers, consumer advocates, and civil rights groups that represent students. Primary.
Ashley Napperly.
Alternate.
Tamar Hoffman.
Thank you. Student loan servicers, collection agencies, lenders, and guarantee agencies. Primary.
Alex Ritchie.
Alternate.
Lori Hartung.
Organizations representing taxpayers and the public interest. Primary.
Alex Holt.
Alternate.
Andrew Gillen.
Private nonprofit institutions of higher education, including a number of groups. We'll say a number of minority serving institutions are included in there as well. Primary.
Jenna Colvin.
Alternate.
Patty Kohler.
Proprietary institutions. Primary.
Andy Vaughn.
Alternate.
Jeffrey Bodemer.
Public institutions, also including minority serving institutions. Primary.
Timothy King.
Alternate. Alternate Matthew Ellsworth is absent this week and participating by live stream where possible. State officials.
Scott Kemp.
Alternate.
Bennett Boggs.
Student loan borrowers. Primary.
Deborah Lilly.
And the alternate, Emeka Ogu, is unable to be here this week. Student loan borrowers who are veterans, military service members, or groups representing them. The primary, Faisal Solman, is absent this week, and the alternate is currently not present. And then on the federal side,
Tammy Abernathy, federal negotiator.
Jake Lallo, Office of General Counsel.
thank you very much. Do any negotiators have any questions before we get started?
All right.
Alex Holt.
I have a comment from following up on something from yesterday. It would now be the appropriate time to do that. All right, so I just wanted to clarify something I said yesterday about the proration proposal from Legal Aid, that I was mistaken on the proposal that they had given. So it is, in my opinion, the intent of Congress that in certain circumstances, the calculation for income for a jointly married couple may be doubled, but it is not the intention for their payments to be doubled. So just a quick example with numbers for the record. So if two borrowers both make $51,000, if they file separately, they would both be charged 5% of their income. So they would pay $2,550 per year. If they filed jointly, they would be charged 10% of their joint income. And so they would be charged $10,200 a year. So that is doubled. But what you don't want to do is make each borrower pay $10,200, because that would be $20,400, and that would be 20% of their take-home income, which was never the intention. Okay.
Jacob.
Yeah, Alex, thank you for your comment and input. We are definitely aware of that problem. We're really carefully looking at the proration issue. We started in on it last night. Realized that was not something we were going to be able to put an answer together for. Yeah,
last night.
Yeah, exactly. It's a big issue. We recognize the potential impact to borrowers. We have the clear legislative text that tells us how to approach, how the calculation for adjusted gross income works. We can't, just divine the intent of Congress that carefully, though. So, we need to very carefully look at the overall statutory scheme and, previous ways that we've handled this in regards to, the adjustments made regarding pay and IDR. And so we wanted to look at that really carefully. And so we're hoping to have an answer tomorrow, but that is, as you noted, a big impact to borrowers. And so we want to be very careful and deliberate with how that decision is made. So we anticipate having an answer for you tomorrow. But again, thank you for your input on that.
Tammy?
We really need to take the time to get this right. And so part of what we're doing right now, is several individuals who are not in this room that are normally in this room are up there fleshing things out. And so when we're not prepared to show you what our solution is to the things that you bring to us, that's one of those situations. And while we started it late last night, we still have to go all the way up to get exactly where we need to be. But your points are well taken, and we really appreciate the fact that you brought this up, because it's very easy to combine things and end up putting borrowers in a position that is not where we expected to put them. And so we really appreciate you continuing to flesh these things out for us, push us to continue to look and make sure that we're getting it right. And that's what we're doing right now. They're getting it right while we sit down here, and we're just going to let those brilliant minds up there flesh it out. And then when we're prepared, hopefully it will be by tomorrow, we can share that with you guys. But as a result of all of those proposals in reference to the proration, we'll call it a proration of, or we'll call it a married borrower's penalty, we're looking at that. And so rest assured, we don't need any more proposals on it. Thank you very much. We have them. We have everything that we need to, no, seriously, we have everything that we need to look at. So thank you for doing that and pushing back a little bit so that we can get this right. I guess it's still me. All right, so let's go through some, sir, excuse me, hold on.
Jacob?
Yeah, so in the copy of 285-209 that you received today with the discussion draft, it may include some language regarding proration. That is not finalized language. That was draft language that OPE worked up in the possibility that we do include proration within the calculation. It's not finalized. Don't treat it as finalized or a department proposal in that regard. It's just working language that we were working with in anticipation that we may have to include proration within that calculation.
Tammy?
I need you to pretend like you're not even seeing it. Please do not share that. Please do not go external with it.
They don't have it yet. Oh.
Well, then we're not sorry we sent something to you that we didn't send to you. We're going to be okay today.
Yeah.
I think more coffee is definitely in order. I really think you guys are playing a game of stump the Fed, but I'm not so sure it's not my own team trying to stump the Fed at the moment. So
Thank you for leaving the copies on the table.
I'm going to start so that we can get out of the rabbit hole that we've just dug ourselves into twice. All right, so Alex, we do have your proposal. We're not going to do much with it at the moment, but rest assured we are reviewing it. And that is the proposal on the proration that we talked about. Sir? Did you not send one in about the proration? Right, okay. That's what I'm talking about. Thank you. So on your other issues, I believe we've covered everything from the expected time to credential, that to an AN institution, and we're still evaluating the monthly payment, the minimum monthly payment. We still don't think we have the authority to do such, and then the authority of ICR. So those particular pieces that you referenced on your email from last week, we have those in there, and we did talk about this. I just want to reiterate on 682-215 from Ashley. This is about the a borrower may elect to have their aggregate monthly payment recalculated not to exceed, and you have several things. We have made some changes to clarify that pay is 10%, and IBR, you'll see the reg text changes a little bit earlier, so I think that gets to quite what you were thinking about at one point in time, and we're not going to take the other changes. I wanted to get a clarification from you because I am confused about one of the pieces. On 685-209, the OBBB allows borrowers who have consolidated Parent Plus loans before July 1, 2026 and repaid using an IDR plan to enroll in IBR, and the department has previously made clear that it interprets this language to allow such borrowers to enroll in IBR as soon as they've made at least one payment in an IDR plan. We are concerned that the language in 685-209C 5 Romanet 3, capital A, may restrict such borrowers from switching from ICR to IBR before July 1, 2028, contrary to the OBBB language and Ed's prior interpretations. We recommend the department amend that section to clarify that such borrowers may switch from ICR or other IDR plans. I believe when we get to this that we have fixed that. But if we have not fixed it where you think we've gotten it right at that point in time, please circle back and let us know, because we are trying to do an interpretation of what we thought we heard you say. And right now, I don't think any of us should just trust that. We want to make sure that we're getting it right. We already know about the proposal about the marriage. We already know that we're accepting the changes from Alex Ritchie. Alex, I believe you sent this in again, correct? Like you sent an official request, and we just want to make sure that we have that. We have made that change. Yes, sir. We've already talked a lot about the AWG and the things that we are going to address in the preamble versus what we're going to try to do in specific reg text. Okay, so for Fresh Start, what we've decided to do, a borrower will have rehabilitation, an opportunity to rehabilitate their loans twice, not 3 times. So as a result of Fresh Start, even though that may have been one time that they received a rehabilitation, they will still have 1 extra time per the new statutory changes. They'll get twice. We cannot give them a third. There's no authority to give them a third. So they got that rehabilitation through Fresh Start without having to make any payments. So we're not going to give a third opportunity for rehabilitation. It's not in the statute. We can only go up to the 2.
Alex Holt. We need to make sure when we're speaking that we are on the microphone so that the live stream can pick that up.
I yield my time to Alex Ritchie and Ashley, and then I'll go after.
Okay, Alex Ritchie, then Ashley, then Alex Holt.
I understand that Fresh Start was an initiative of the previous administration, but can the department elaborate on how a rehabilitation with 0 payments required is a rehabilitation?
Jacob.
Yeah, so I think that was essentially how they worked it through, right? The statute only allowed 1 rehab at the time, but the logic that underpinned Fresh Start was that there's not really a payment going into it. What we read this as different is, we've now increased the threshold. OBB increased the threshold to 2. You get 2 rehabs. So we read that as codifying a general benefit to all borrowers. If you get 2 rehabs, period. We realized Fresh Start did not count as a rehab for the purposes of, that first limitation. So if you'd already had a rehab, you got a second one. But we don't read that as creating the opportunity to have a third bite at the apple. If, say, you rehabbed once, you rehabbed again under Fresh Start, and you're rehabbing again now, that's just allowing borrowers to continue rehabbing, and it defeats the logic of a rehab. A rehab is to bring somebody into, repayment and compliance with their debt obligations rather than, continued chances, basically.
Tammy, did you want to add something?
I would. I believe, Eric, correct me if, is Batman over there? Yes, he is. I see you. Hi, Eric. I believe that one of the reasons that the Fresh Start, there was a lot of different reasons that the administration chose to look at that particular provision and Fresh Start. And I believe that, I can't remember off the top of my head, and Eric, hold me accountable here. I believe that because some borrowers may have already completed a rehab and there was no authority to grant them another rehab, the way that they allowed borrowers to get a fresh start was to allow them to have the rehabilitation and get the fresh start. So I think that was one of the considerations, but Eric can correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Also, if I can jump in real quick, Eric, sorry, not to preempt Batman. There's a little bit of a nuance there too with Fresh Start, that Fresh Start isn't a rehab, because if you look at the way that pamphlet that you guys sent to us is worded, it provides for both rehabs during the COVID pause and Fresh Start. Those are different things. So if you just went through Fresh Start, that's not a rehab. But the rehab during the COVID pause is a rehab for the purpose of this. It still counts towards your 2-time limit. Fresh Start is a different bucket. So, because that's again, a fresh start, so to speak, right?
Ashley.
Yeah, I think we're maybe talking past each other. So the point of us providing that informational handout about Fresh Start, we're not saying that Fresh Start is rehab. We're saying borrowers who could have taken advantage of Fresh Start, but instead rehabbed and made payments into the rehabilitation process should not be penalized by having that count against the number of rehabs they're entitled to. That's what this says. So we're not saying Fresh Start is rehab. We're saying borrowers who could have used Fresh Start but didn't, and rehab should not be able to rehab again in the future. So that, according to this was not supposed to count against them. And now you're saying it is, just because OBB allows them to rehab one more time.
Let's let Eric jump in here.
So yeah, if I can, Eric Hardy, FSA. Operationally, once the Fresh Start program was in place, we did not rehab any loans. So we would solely direct those borrowers only through the Fresh Start program, not through the rehab program. Now, to Jacob's point, if they rehabbed prior to us starting the Fresh Start agreement, but after the COVID pause began, those potentially could have, but those were real rehabs and they took advantage of it. And they were not Fresh Start. So,
and to that point, again, OBB says 2 rehabs. It's very explicit in that regard. So I don't think there's a way that we can word that around that to not, treat that as a rehab when looking at the rehab limit.
Also, we are going to have clarifying language go up on the website. We're going to take down the Fresh Start pamphlet, and they're going to be prompted to go to the OBBB website for additional information. Our hands are tied. The statute says 2. There's nothing we can do about it.
Alex Holt, we were going to return to you.
I'll let Alex go one more time.
Alex Ritchie.
Thank you for your generosity. So I just want to make sure that I understand the department's position, because this has operational consequences for some of my constituencies. And I'm just going to use an example, and if I need to follow up in writing, please let me know. If I'm a borrower who entered default for the first time and the pandemic hit, and I took use of Fresh Start, the department's position is that that is not a rehabilitation, and I still have, as a borrower, 2 times that I can go through rehabilitation. Okay, thank you.
That is exactly what we're saying. I think the question was for those borrowers that did not take advantage of Fresh Start but actually rehabbed, they want to get a third, the ability to do it twice. We're not going to do that. We are locked into having 2. So unfortunately, or despite the fact that they took advantage of what was already available to them and rehabilitated their loans and did not go through Fresh Start, we cannot, there's no provision in the statute that allows us to waive what Fresh Start was and give them a third opportunity to rehab. This is the second opportunity to rehab. They still have that opportunity, like all borrowers have 2 opportunities to rehab. And you heard Batman say that once they started, there were none of those that were going through. So at least, the universe of that is at least relatively contained.
Yeah, appreciate that we're talking about a relatively small pool in the grand scheme of things, but it does matter to those borrowers. So much appreciated. Thank you.
Alex Holt.
Thank you. Yeah. So Tammy, I just wanted to flag that one thing you didn't mention in the email was that I sent that you had covered was the Parent Plus question related to program of study.
Are we playing Stump the Fed again? All right, let me, I need to go back and look. Is that the undergraduate level?
Yeah.
Okay, I think we clarified this already.
Okay.
We did fix that.
Okay.
But let's, when we go through the reg text, let's make sure
Okay.
that did the fix that it was supposed to.
Great. Thank you.
Phew. We are going to skip over Patty and Jenna's example for just a second, but I did want to mention we have not sent to you the scenarios and the supporting documentation that we said we were going to send to you, because once we got this couple of questions in with additional scenarios, we decided that we would add that to the existing scenarios and send those out to you once we finalize everything, so that everything looks the same. We certainly don't want a bunch of different things, going out and about and not having it match. The team did a really good job with trying to create a document for those so that you would have that as a resource going back, and you could use that if you needed to at your institutions or with your constituencies. So we want to make sure that you have all of the scenarios so that you can take that back. You're welcome. Okay. We already know about the third or clarifying proposal, clarifying payment plan availability for FFEL borrowers who take out new loans. So I think we're not changing anything here. Borrowers have the ability to consolidate, so you have to consolidate in order to take advantage of this. So there's really nothing that we can change here on that. So unless we're missing something on your particular request, there's not really anything that we can do here, because there are ways that borrowers can maneuver into those plans, but those are specific. Yes, ma'am.
Ashley?
Just wanted to clarify, so we were seeking confirmation from the department that for borrowers who have FFEL loans that don't require to be consolidated to be eligible for IBR pre-July 1st, 2026, and if they take out a loan after July 1st of 2026 and it's a direct loan, that the FFEL loans can still be repaid in IBR while the direct loans can be repaid in RAP. We just wanted confirmation of that from the department.
That is correct.
Okay, is it possible to get that in writing? Because I feel like this is going to be a big issue for a lot of borrowers, and having that clarified and clear would be really helpful and transparent.
It's already understood, but we'll take that back and see what we can do to make
Okay.
sure.
Okay, thank
But
you.
overall, I mean, it's already what is said in the regulations.
I know,
So,
but we're just getting a lot of confusion
lot of
from
confusion.
constituency.
Okay, yeah, let us take a look at that.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
If one of my team would make a note of that, please. Okay, those are the proposals, and then I think we did all of the ones that came in, and I think, Alex, you sent another clarification this morning or yesterday about,
That was the.
yeah, so we're good with that. Okay, let's talk about reg text. I believe there's a summary document that we're going to share on the screen. As I mentioned yesterday, when we start to go over the reg provisions, we'll go over the full reg provision here, but on your document, the summary document, you're just going to see what changes happened in 685-102. Okay? So here in 685-102, subparagraph B, Romanet 1, under expected time to credential, from July 1, 2026, the expected time for a student to complete a program that is equal to or the lesser of 3 academic years. We have removed the comma, we have deleted its equivalent, and we have added as defined in 34 CFR 668.3. That was a recommendation from Alex, I believe.
Tammy, I apologize for interrupting you. I'm just, for those of us who are having a little trouble following on the screen, can we ask that this also get sent around just so that we can follow while you're reading? Apologies to interrupt you.
You just need it in an email?
That would be great, just because sometimes it's hard to follow on the screen.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Sorry about
Absolutely. I think it was just sent. So could you refresh and make sure, and then we'll give you a second to get that pulled up. Thank you for flagging that. You got it? Yep, okay. No, it's fine. I'd rather you all have what you need to see than to go over this and have to do it again because you can't see it. That red is a little hard to see, isn't it? Can we make that screen a little bit bigger, Linnea? Is that possible? It's a little bit better. Thank you. Okay, so it did come out of our discussions, and so we just wanted to point out that we have made that change. I think that is the only change that we are going to discuss at the moment. We expect to get to professional student. Don't worry, I know y'all are waiting with bated breath to get to that, but we're just, just not quite ready because we have all these other reg provisions to go through. All right, let's switch our attention to 685-203, please. I believe the first change that we come to is paragraph E. I'm sorry, excuse me. Yes, E for Romanet 1 and Romanet 2. We talked about this already where we've changed to an institution. In both of those provisions, we think that that was the intent. We had gone back and forth on that yesterday. We finalized that it is an institution. The next change, I believe, is in Romanet 4 of F4, F2, Romanet 4. And this is one that was also at the request of one of our negotiators. For the purposes of this paragraph subparagraph F, a program of study means a program that confers an associate's or a baccalaureate degree. So we have clarified at this point that what a program of study means. This is what we mean under this respective subparagraph F, which is about direct plus loan annual limit. Okay?
While we have a minute in between, I wanted to have Bob introduce himself since we had already taken roll and he's arrived.
Bob Carey, military veteran. Sorry for being late. I've had a friend that's entered hospice care, and so I had to take care of that.
Thank you.
I just want to go on the official record of saying thank you, team. You guys are rocking it, getting everything ready for everybody. We really appreciate it. This really is real time, live, at every minute changes. So it really does take a village to get all that ready. So thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Ashley?
Sorry, Tammy, can you just repeat what you said? This definition is just for Parent Plus loans? Is that annual limit? Is that what you said?
Yes, it's under subparagraph F, which is the direct plus loan annual limits. And so this, we talked a little bit earlier about Alex's proposal, and this is our way to handle that. And I think Jake wants to chime in here as well, but yes, this is for direct plus annual loan limit provisions in subparagraph F.
Jacob?
Yeah, I did just want to add a point of clarification here. We accepted Alex's proposal basically as is for the purposes of this reg text, that it's basically within degree type for the purposes of Parent Plus loans. We think that this is probably an incredibly permissive way of reading program of study. It could be read much more narrowly to even basically restrict it to changing your major or, moving really in any way that would disrupt the quote unquote narrow program of study that a student is under. Program of study is not defined within the HEA itself, and it's not defined for the purposes of this section. So we think it could be read much more narrowly based on the plain language definition. So for right now, we have the broad definition proposed by Alex Holt in there that it is basically within the degree type. But we do believe that this could also be read much more narrowly. So if you have input on that, we are happy to hear it. But yeah, this is the working definition that we have.
Scott and then Jenna.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you clarified it, but just want to make sure. So if somebody starts as an undeclared major and then becomes a business major, they're still within a program of study, or changes from English to engineering to English, it's still considered within this program of study.
Yeah, we had substantial conversation about that. We really worked this through every permutation. Like I said, we believe that we would be justified in restricting this to again a single major. I think the point that you brought up there, the undeclared major who then declares a major, how do you handle that? Again, the engineering English switch or something like that. And I think they're all slightly different permutations, right? Like, because some schools admit students as undeclared majors and then they declare a major. That's a little bit different than somebody straight up switching from one major to another. But we wanted to basically take the broad approach for now. We think that this is a fair way of doing this. It's in line with what Alex is doing it. But we do believe it would be permissible for us to go to the very narrow read of if you change majors, period, it's a change in program of study. So I wanted that point of clarification in there as we discuss this, in case negotiators have feedback on that, because I think it's a salient thing that's worth discussing. But I thought it was helpful to explain our logic a little bit.
And if I may,
Jenna? Go ahead.
if I may interject, that also, so we have some schools that put their students, their incoming freshman class, into undeclared or undecided majors for 2 years. That was one of the considerations that we were looking at. I mean, that is something that a school is permitted to do. And so how would we account for that? We certainly don't want to penalize borrowers with the ability to get the education. So the best way for us to do this is to be as broad strokes as we possibly can be. And, Timothy mentioned yesterday, it's not always undeclared majors, it's undecided as well. And so we know the fluctuations between our little Johnnies and Susies and Samantha's and everybody else that go into school. We don't know, they change a lot. They don't really know. And the schools that force them to choose something right as an entering freshman may not be where they end up in their junior year. So we do want to give the flexibility, but we don't want to take it too far. We feel like we've done that. But again, we don't want to hamstring the secretary with her discretion.
And because, as Tammy said, we don't want to take it too far. Again, we want input from you guys on whether or not it should be restricted and tighter than that. And because we think that there are situations that do call for it. We don't want to necessarily provide for the possibility that students can stay in school forever.
Jenna?
I just want to say thank you. I think that this is really good for students. I think a lot of them show up and get exposed to things they haven't seen in their life and may change their program of study. And this allows them to do that. We know that changing programs of study can lead to longer time in college, which leads to more expense. And so not also punishing them on the loan side is important. So thank you.
Alex Holt?
Thank you for the change. Two things. First, I wanted to just clarify for the record why it's associates and baccalaureate, and it doesn't include certificate. To be clear, I don't think it should include certificate. And if you don't have a justification, I do. But I was wondering if you had thought through why certificate wouldn't be included.
We did talk this through, but I'm very curious to hear your reasoning before I answer that question.
So a certificate, typically, I would argue that if a student's getting a certificate, they are choosing a specific program of study. as opposed to an associate or a bachelor's degree, and so it shouldn't be included in here.
Yeah, that was our read as well. Yeah, that's dead on. That basically, if you're getting a certificate, you're getting a certificate to do a specific thing. There's not really a good way to switch between them. So yeah, we didn't think it needed to be added in here.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I also just want to state for the record, because probably sometimes it doesn't look like I'm the taxpayer advocate, but I really am. And I just want to note for the record that Parent Plus loans generate revenue for the federal government. And so this more expansive definition does not actually cost money.
Ashley.
Well, Alex took the question right out of my mouth. I was going to ask why certificate programs were excluded from this definition.
Bob.
If someone is currently in a bachelor's program and then halfway through school gets accepted to a combined bachelor's master's program, how does that impact this? Not at all is fine, but
Jacob.
That's a great question. We're going to take that one back. The combined bachelor's and master's programs have some kind of fun rules with, how they interplay with loans, Pell, all that stuff. So I think we need to take that back and look at that more carefully.
that is a
But
that is a very popular option for veteran students
Okay.
who may be older. And then going back to the certificate. So
Hold on.
go ahead. Okay.
These are plus loans. So veteran students that may be older, by definition, if they're a veteran, they're already independent, so they wouldn't be getting a plus loan.
Probably unless they're disabled.
there are permutations, but it's possible.
Yeah, but
Okay, okay.
Alex Ritchie.
I was hoping that the Department of Education, it sounds like you put a lot of thought into constructing a very specific definition of program of study for this particular instance as it relates to plus loans. But program of study, while not defined in the Higher Education Act, is sprinkled throughout a number of times. And in the moment, I'm struggling to think through, potential second order consequences, because once you establish, and I know it's narrowly defined for just this paragraph, but it's usually in terms of study abroad, or it's in the HEA right now, it references a lot of study abroad when referencing programs of study, but it also, there's a number of grant programs, competitive grant programs in the HEA, where program of study, based on sort of like a plain reading, because I am not a lawyer, reading of the law would suggest that program of study isn't a level of degree type, but a specific learning pathway, like a major. So could you just give us a little bit more insight into why you're comfortable being this broad in this specific case, and how this would or would not impact the department's thinking as we proceed?
so one of the things is because exactly for what you said, there are a lot of differences in what a program of study is. All across our programs, we did not want to create a definition of program of study in a definition section that it was applicable to all across the board. So we chose under this respective subsection F to hone in on these, based on the proposal that we received, to hone in on this very specific instance here, and not do it across the board for a program of study in other areas. And I appreciate the question. We can take that back and circle back and let Jake jump in case he has something additional to add. But I did want to clarify, yes, we did specifically put it under this subsection so that we did not have to define program of study somewhere else that would impede what program of study is for those respective other subsections and sections of the regulations.
Yeah,
Jacob.
just to add to that, I think, Alex, you hit the nail on the head when you said second order consequences. It's used throughout the HEA, and it's used sometimes in ways that are different depending on context. And we did not feel that it was appropriate to define program of study overall when the usage in this paragraph is pretty narrow. We thought it was much more appropriate to just create a narrow definition for this purpose. I don't disagree with your second read. As I noted, I think that this could be read much more restrictively than the way we're reading it here. If you have any proposals on that, we welcome them. But we thought that this is a permissible read within this specific paragraph, that it encapsulates the full degree type rather than just a specific major. But likewise, we also think that the more restrictive reading is just as appropriate and could also be justified.
Timothy.
Thank you. I agree with Jenna. Appreciate this language has been included. I think the onus is going to be on higher ed to ensure that our students are given the correct applicable career resources to make that decision sooner. 80% of students change at least once, about 30 or 40% change twice. And beyond that is the danger of some serious stopouts. So that costs everybody. But I did want to kind of reflect on what Alex said with certificate programs. At least at the 4-year level, they're increasing. And my institution is looking into offering certificate programs. And the other 4 years in our state are doing that as well. Anywhere from what? It could be 3 months, a week, depends on what kind of certificate you're looking into. But if you can use Pell for certificate, shouldn't we also be addressing that a little bit more with language? Just an ask.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I appreciate the comment. We can take that back and consider it a little bit. Like I said, I think Alex's point was generally, how we looked at this, that you get a certificate for a specific purpose. So there's not generally a lot of changing, but I appreciate your comment about how the increase of certificate programs within 4-year degrees, and I think that is salient. So it's worth considering, especially in regards to the fact that Pell incorporates it.
Scott.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to piggyback on what Bob said. A classic example for students would be starting in a bachelor's degree program and then going into education and getting a master's degree in teaching or master's in education. Those are classic 5-year programs that give you an example. But I had for my own, I just wanted to clarify, and I may be reading too much into it because you said we talked about certificates, but because you said associates and bachelor's degrees, in a Commonwealth like Virginia, where we have a very robust associate's degree program and encourage people to transfer, if they get the associate's degree, transfer into a bachelor's degree program, I want to make sure that the impact on the Parent Plus loan eligibility, and again, realizing the community college degree programs are not as expensive, and we're not necessarily talking about annual limits, but so in other words, they would still be able to borrow after. In other words, this wouldn't impact anybody who's transferring from associate's degree to bachelor's degree.
Yeah, we considered that pretty heavily. So I think the difference is whether or not they graduate with an associate's degree versus whether or not they're transferring into, like, all the credit is going towards a bachelor's degree, right? Like, there are transfer institutions. So all your credit feeds into the ultimate degree, because we discussed this pretty heavily. So, if you're doing 2 years at a community college and that credit all counts towards that bachelor's degree, I think we would consider that all within the same program of study because it ultimately leads to the bachelor's degree, right? But if you're getting an associate's degree and then later on, you go and get a bachelor's degree, and they're two standalone things that aren't, like, the associate's degree is not contributing to the bachelor's degree or resulting in credit awarded to that bachelor's degree, I don't think we would count that as the same program of study because then they're two standalone things.
Okay, so then ergo at that point, if they start a new bachelor's program and none of their credits transferred, they're no longer eligible for Parent Plus loans?
I'm sorry, I was reading so that I could
Okay.
clarify something else. So if you want to re-ask your question.
Sure. Well, in Jacob's example, there are when you look at how the community college systems are set up, typically you have the transfer degree programs, which are designed to transfer all the credits into a 4-year institution. And you also have the career path or terminal. I don't like that term, where you start in a path that's supposed to lead to a career, but maybe you change your mind and decide to go on to a 4-year college. So, but I understand from what Jacob was saying is that if they do a career degree, then that's
Yeah,
considered
so
a
I think we
study.
need to take it back and look.
So one thing I'd like to point out is we are in the section of loan limits. And so we are now morphing into all these permutations and something that we're talking about the loan limits here.
Right.
And where we are concerned about the program of study is we're talking about this limited time where the limitation for annual loan limits described in F2 Romanet 1 of this section shall not be applicable to parent borrowers who borrowed a loan on behalf of a dependent student during the period the student's expected time to credential if the student enrolled in a program of study at an institution as of June 30th, 2026, and a direct loan was made to the parent borrower for such program of study on behalf of the dependent student, or a direct loan was made to the dependent student for such program of study. We're not taking on all of the program of study. So I just want us to, let's make sure that we're specifically relating to the loan limit provisions so that we understand, because I feel like we're getting a little ahead of ourselves with all of the different things. If you do have proposals for us on this language for us to consider, please put that in and we can take it back. But I think we have heard what we need to hear on this respective position, unless there's anything new that you guys are saying about it.
You asked me to repeat the question. I didn't go all the way back to the
Yes.
beginning of it. And the beginning of it was, what impact would this have on the loan limits for Parent Plus loan limits for a student that goes to an associate's degree program, either graduates from that or transfers before they complete it, go on to a bachelor's degree? What impact would that have on the Parent Plus loan limits? So that is the context of the question or discussion.
Okay, so we're going to take that back and look at it more carefully. I do want to clarify. I think, we have to be careful with the chain of eligibility, right? So like what I was trying to get at, and perhaps I explained it poorly, is that, like there are schools that have feeder schools that feed into a larger school. You do a couple of years and then you move into another institution. There is an argument that basically all of that is within the same thing because you're leading to a baccalaureate degree, right? Whereas if you're getting an associate's degree from school A and then you go to school B later, those are two completely separate things. There's a complete break in the chain. So I think we need to be very careful with how we define program of study within this context, that like we can't just sum the degrees up. It's gotta lead somewhere. So we'll look at it more carefully. But
I think I have an answer on this. So this particular provision, we are giving annual loan limits before July 1, 2026. We're giving annual loan limits after July 1, 2026. So for periods of enrollment beginning on or after July 1, 2026, the total amount of all direct plus loans all parents may borrow on behalf of each dependent student for an academic year of study may not exceed $20,000 minus other financial assistance as defined in section 480 Romanet, or I think it's 480I of the Act for the student. Then, so what that means right there is that eligibility is still there. And then the limitation is for these, the limitation is for parent borrowers who borrowed a loan on behalf of a dependent student during the period the student's expected time to credential and then if the student withdraws, and then we're clarifying. So in a case where, I think for me, in a case, what you're describing is not the limitation. Is that your understanding as well?
Well, no, I'm just making sure because in the definition now of program study where you differentiate and break out between associates and degree. So and initially the concern was program of study meant major. So going from undeclared to a declared major would make you ineligible to continue on with the Parent Plus program. Now that you put associate's degree or bachelor's degree, I'm just trying to confirm that going from an associate's degree program to a bachelor's degree program does not impact the eligibility on loan limit. So the definition that you came up with helped with the major issue. I'm just trying to make sure it doesn't create a problem with the transfer issue. And anybody else jump in, please, if I'm not making sense.
We have a number of cards up, and I know, Tammy, you thought maybe you had enough, but Jacob, do you want to step in first before we get to the cards? Okay. We have Alex Holt, then Alex Ritchie, then Ashley, then Andy, and then Timothy. Now, some cards may go down once they hear what the others say. Thank you. So we'll start now with Alex Holt.
It's not about this fun discussion. I want to go back to something that Alex Ritchie said about the concern about sort of opening up the floodgates with program of study. And Jake, based on your point that it really is contextual because we have so many different times and ways that it's used within the HEA, it might be prudent to also define program of study when it comes to graduate degrees. So in the graduate loan limits section, then if we're saying it's defined here, we should define it there partially just to protect from a future department to mess with it.
Jacob. Okay, we'll move on to Alex Ritchie.
So I was able to gather my thoughts and listening to this conversation. I think it's interesting, and it's a bad pun, but let's engage in a little bit of an academic exercise here. Here's my concern. It's not just, so I think Alex raised a really good point about consistency across different parts, but specific to this rulemaking and what we're trying to do here with implementing HR 1, Congress gave institutions a new authority to lower loan limits by program of study. So I don't want to say flippantly, but by trying to, and I'm very sympathetic to the plight of students and families trying to figure out and navigate this transition. Like I want to underscore that. But by defining program of study so broadly in this particular section of Parent Plus limits as associates and baccalaureate degree, what are we doing then for institutions that want to lower loan limits for, let's say, history major, but not lower at the baccalaureate degree level, but not lower loan limits for their engineer? We can't, now we're just picking and choosing how we at this level want program of study to mean when Congress used the same words. I'm very worried about that as we move forward, because for my constituency, we need consistency, we need that clarity, and I think institutions would want that too.
Thank you for sharing that. We're going to listen to the rest of the comments and we will take that back. Thank you.
Ashley.
I just want to reiterate that I share the concerns that Timothy raised and also that Scott raised with regards to certificate programs and especially to students who are earning an associate's degree and then transferring to a university, a four-year university. I feel like they're going to be especially harmed by this definition. So I would encourage the department to just take this back and just think about it even more than they already have, which I appreciate that you already have. And I also wanted to ask a follow-up question to Jacob. When you mentioned that in coming up with this definition, you carefully considered that students enrolled in certificate programs don't switch between programs. And I was wondering if there's specific data that you relied upon, and if so, if you could share that with us.
Jacob, did you want to respond?
Yeah, as I said, this is essentially a working definition. I think we've heard some good points with certificate programs writ large about, four-year programs and how those interplay with certificates. I think, the general understanding of certificate, we're generally treating it as, you earn this to do a specific task. It's a little bit different than when somebody enrolls in an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree, where they may be expected to change, as Timothy said, quite frequently, 70% of the time. Yeah, I think that was the reason that we didn't include that as a baseline level in the working definition. We're open to including it and talking it through more. If you have data on certificate programs that you'd like us to consider or anything else, please submit them. We're happy to take a look at them.
Next to Andy.
When you take that back, Jacob, the transfer credit process is very messy or fluid. It was kind of an all or nothing proposition that you mentioned, and it rarely works that way. So if a student completes an associate's degree, that should not be a punishment to not allow that change. into a bachelor's program. Community colleges have their mission of mostly transfer, but sometimes the students want to finish the associates to have that win. And that shouldn't punish them for the program change or continuation of study for the funds. And also, not every credit does count in transfer. You were kind of saying all or nothing if it all transfers in, but the word all would be problematic in that case. And I'm sure you're going to flesh that out a little bit more on the exact terminology. But there are a lot of students that major in dabbling, and those credits don't all transfer in. Just keep that in mind when you come up with the reg text. Thanks.
Timothy?
I'll throw a wrench into it. So, we're talking about transfer, okay? In Alabama, if a student earns an associate's degree and transfers to a 4-year, it has to be accepted, bottom line. But one of our issues that we face is when students transfer out of my institutions, 15 of the 20 institutions that are most popular are community colleges. So they're going from a 4-year to a 2-year. And so how does that come into play with this discussion?
I think we just need to hear the rest of the comments and take this back.
Yeah.
Because I think there's some confusion around this, and I want to go back to our team and flesh this out a little bit more. And we're getting more and more information that tells us we need to take this back and take a good look at it. So it's just super helpful. So thank you.
And just to add to that, I mean, you know, like I said, we thought you could take a narrow read of this or a broad read of this. You guys are pointing out why sometimes a simple broad read doesn't necessarily get you to address all the specifics. So thank you for pointing out all the little nuances here and helping us figure out how we want to address that.
Jenna?
Thank you. So to my point earlier, not harming students who are currently enrolled and trying to pursue their degree, I know is an outcome that you're interested in. In trying to be helpful in this particular context, my question is, as it relates to the statute, is program of study language required? Because it does feel a bit like we're contorting the definition of program of study to develop eligibility for the legacy program. Whereas with the Grad Plus loan, the language was clear that you just had to have any loan. Is the statute helpful on this? Is program of study required or credential be or something similar?
It is in the statute, so what we'll do is we'll just take that back. We'll get clarification in the statutory language and go from there. Thank you.
Deborah and then Bob.
Thank you. I want to tag on to something Alex Holt shared earlier about reconsidering the program of study for graduate programs. Certificates come into play in that as well. Oftentimes graduate students will pursue certificates and they may or may not be within their particular discipline or program of study. And so that may be something you want to consider as well as you're reviewing that.
Bob?
Follow up on what Mr. King was talking about. The concern here that we have is that there seems to be a bias, that's too strong of a word, but I'll use that for lack of a better one, a bias towards traditional 4-year educational models when, especially in the military and veteran community, we're seeing a pursuit of something much different. And so to the extent that we need to comply with the statutory requirement, fine. But the initial view from here is that it appears that this is an additional restriction that may not be mandated by the statute. And then with Mr. Ritchie, if you seem to have an idea in the back of your head of how this should look, I'd be interested to know what that is if you have that idea in the back of your head.
Alex Ritchie.
Being put on the spot, Bob, but I appreciate it. Look, I mean, and again, I think this comes from not taking a lawyerly read to the statute, so I apologize for nuances that I'm missing in technicalities. But the common usage of program of study, when I read through it, is specific to a major for using parlance here around the table. I'm struggling to read in program of study meaning anything but a specific SIP code that you're engaged in, because when you open it up to different degree levels, I think that the permutations of what that does throughout the HEA is something that we should be worried about. So that's my concern.
Jen?
Last comment for me. I think there's a huge difference though between graduate and undergraduate, right? I mean, in graduate programs, you're focused, you're going in for something on purpose, whereas in undergraduate, there's an element of exploration that is usually part of the exercise.
Okay, so I want to wrap this up, and this is what I'm going to say. Annual loan limits before July 1, 2026, that is about Grad Plus and Plus loans. Annual loan limits after July 1, 2026, let's remember, graduate plus loans are no longer available. Doesn't matter if they graduate and go into a master's program, graduate plus loans are not available for those borrowers. Now, there is the exception here in this very limited thing, and that's where we're honing in on the definition of program of study. We have heard everything that you have said. We are going to take this back. We are going to look at it. There are system limitations that we also have to account for. It may very well be something that is a brilliant idea, but if our system cannot do that, we are not able to look at designing something in that respective way. So as we pointed out from the beginning, we thought broad was good. We thought we were on the right track. And I think we're on the right track. I'm not sure that we're still on the same track that we were when we started this conversation, or we're on the track that we're going to end up. We need to take this back. You've given us so much to think about, but the people that are not in this room are the very people that we need to have this conversation with. So thank you. We're going to move on because I think we could probably stay here for a really, really, really long time because there's so much to this. We can't get there without you guys, so we appreciate that. But we've heard that we need to take this one back. We just didn't get this quite where we think we should get it. So let us just table this piece and we will take it back.
Deborah, do you have something separate from this?
No, same, but it's just a point of clarification for my own edification on what this may or may not apply to. Is it okay for me to ask?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. So for the program of study definition, understanding that it's for direct plus loans and the annual limits, for annual limits on or after July 1st, 2026. The working definition here refers to program of study that confers an associate's or bachelor's degree. Does this also apply to students who are pursuing a post-bac degree?
Wait a minute, I have to think about that.
I wasn't trying to play Stump the Fed.
You are playing Stump the Fed. I thought I liked you. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just teasing. Let us take that one back because I think what I'm sensing is perhaps we need to look a little bit more at our reg text for clarification purposes because I think that there is some confusion around this. I want to make sure that when we draft reg text and we have, we add a provision thinking that it's going to solve for problem X and we create additional problems with Y, Z, I want to take back and look at the reg text in general and not just this respective provision of program of study to make sure that we're providing the clarification needed in the regulations for you to be able to do what you're supposed to do for your students. So this is a great question. Let us take that piece back as well to make sure that how we have designed this respective subsection, we may need to tweak it ever so slightly, and I don't want to lock us into getting down into all of the different ways that this could could continue to not be where we want it to be. So we'll take that piece back as well. We'll come back after we've had a chance to flesh out many of the comments. We need to meet with our senior leadership, and we need to make sure that we've got this reg provision correct and clear, and it's understandable for all of us, because I think it is a little confusing at the moment.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. And I'm really excited about moving on to aggregate limits. So in this, I'll have Linnea put on the screen provision G2. There it is. So we removed this yesterday based on hearing what you said for an enrollment in an eligible program of study. Thank the Lord we have removed program of study from here, and for the entire period of enrollment. So nice hindsight on that one. Thanks so much. And then we added for the purpose, oh, well, I spoke too soon. We added number 5, which is for the purposes, the program of what, again, with associate's degree and baccalaureate degree for aggregate limits as well. So let us take those 2 provisions back, and we'll circle back after we've had some time on that one. I think one of the other things that we did, if we could go to subsection M, please. We noticed, if you'll look at the screen, we noticed that we had, and this could have created some of the confusion from yesterday, that we had the wrong formula up. You know, I'm not sure why that would have caused any kind of confusion where you were taking the whole, I could not figure out why you guys were taking the whole academic year for that one period of enrollment. But now I see that we did not have the correct formula up there. So for the period of time for a borrower who is a one-term borrower and transfers to another institution or only attends one institution, or in the case, I believe this is still applicable to what you were talking about with the borrower in their last period of attendance, you know you have to prorate that period of time. So if you take the same concept of number of credit hours enrolled for the term, you define the term, and in that case, that proration is that term, right? We're taking liberties here, but you get the idea. That proration for less than a full academic year could just immediately be put right in there. So whatever you decide, the number of credit hours enrolled for that respective period of time for that borrower, or for a transfer student would be 1 semester if you're a standard academic year. And then you take that over the number of hours considered full-time for that term. So what you're doing now is you're taking the universe of a full year and you're taking it down to the period of time that that student is at your institution, or in the case that you were talking about, Patty, where it's this period of time. What do you define full-time as for that period of time? And what is the borrower taking as full-time for that, taking in hours for that period of time? If it's less than what you define as full-time, at least half-time, obviously, and 3/4 time, then you would figure it out that way. If you try to take it over the whole year of 24, you would double dip. But the minute you don't take it over 24 and you take it where you decide the period, excuse me, I'm having trouble with this mic today. You decide the period of time, you decide what is full-time for that period of time, and then you base it on what the borrower is actually enrolled in that period of time. So it changes the calculation where you're not double dipping. It's a universe. You have to define the period of time first. So yes, they are getting 2 prorations, but does it harm them? Not in the way it would if you considered it for the full 24. So now I get why you were confused. Yeah, thank you. No, I at first, because I was like, why, what is wrong with this? Like, if this is a simple math, and I am not your math expert, let me tell you, even though I've been in financial aid for 40 years. So I couldn't understand what the breakdown was. And when I saw it, I was like, oh, I know, now I know. Now I see why it, and when I saw your scenario, I was like, why is she doing over the full academic? You know, what would be considered for the full period. So that's why. Does that help? And we'll get you answers to your scenarios, but I think based on that, and we'll go over them in just a second, based on that, I think it provides the clarification and at least gives you the right formula to look at if it's just one period of time of enrollment. Hopefully that'll help.
Jenna?
So it sounds like Patty understood all that, which is awesome. I have just a technical question on the paper. When I look at the 1027 2005 definition, the words in the formula are the same as the words in the formula you just shared with us.
I need you to look at the 11.3
Ah,
definition
my
and not
mistake.
1027.
mistake.
We have changed. So what you got initially was what we had at 10.3. Then what you got was at 1027. So the week before negotiations were required to give you the reg text. We had it wrong there, which is what we're correcting here. And so for 11.3, excuse me, 11.4 now, we think we finally got it right for you. So please look at the most recent reg text that we sent to you. And hopefully that will help clarify. And that's for everything because it is very easy. I've done it. I was on the wrong reg provision when we were talking through some things yesterday afternoon, and it really will confuse you. So every day that we hand you new stuff, make sure that's the new stuff that you're looking at when you're talking about, because we've made changes based on your concerns and your questions and forcing us to rethink things. Yes, ma'am. New 203 as of 11.3, well, Linnea's screen is 11.4. We did also correct two corresponding cross-references in Romanet 2 and Romanet 4. We had L as in Larry, and it's M in Romanet 2 and Romanet 3. It's on the screen if you need to take a look at it. So now we at least have our cross-references correct as well. Okay, those are all the changes, thank the Lord. In 203, loan limits, we will look at what you guys have given us so much to think about, and we appreciate that. Let me find my reg text here. The other provision that I would like for us to go through is a new, so we started with 16 proposed regulatory provisions that we were changing as a result of OBBB. If we will go to 685, 303, we now have the 17th reg provision that we are changing. We have added, as a result of this schedule of reductions and making sure that we have it correct and not, this came out of a proposal, I want to say it was from Tamar and Ashley, that we needed to look at the substantially equal provision, dispersing in substantially equal amounts. And when you look at the schedule of reductions, if it doesn't so if a borrower's full-time in one part of the academic year, award year, you're going to have this issue if they're part-time or three-quarter time in whatever, if they started three-quarter time or half-time, or if they the second term that they enrolled are three-quarter time, half-time. This is where you're going to have a substantially unequal disbursement. And that would have gone against the very regs that were already in play in 685-303, where you must disperse in substantially equal amounts. So we have added a provision in 685-303 that says the school must disperse loan proceeds. We've added to the already existing provision that says the school must disperse loan proceeds in substantially equal installments, and no installment may exceed 1/2 of the loan. We have added, except when borrowers are subject to the award year loan limit for less than full-time enrollment as described in 34 CFR 685-209, lowercase m, the institution will disperse in according with such schedule of reductions. So that takes care of your concern about substantially equal disbursements not being, the schedule of reductions not being subject to that provision.
Tammy, I appreciate you taking the time to explain this. I just wanted to flag that I don't think that we have the provision that you're reading from. Does everybody else have it except for me?
Isn't it on the summary?
Oh, I was looking at page. You're right. Apologies.
No, that's okay. So So the summary is what we're going to try to give you daily when we make changes so that we don't have to print these very long reg provisions. So I'll make sure that hopefully we'll have it earlier tomorrow, but there's no telling. We change things right up to the last minute. Okay, any questions about the schedule of reductions? Let's take a second. If this goes south, we're doing a caucus, I'm just telling you, because I do not want to confuse everybody. I need to get to your proposal, so give me just a second, Patty and Jenna. Okay. Linnea, is it possible for you to switch screens and pull up Jenna's email, or would that take too much time? Okay, I'm going to start talking. If Linnea is able to find that quickly, we'll go ahead and we'll add it. If not, we'll just talk it through. Okay. In regards to what appears to be a double adjustment to less than full-time enrollment for students at the end of their program that will not attend a full academic year and loans are prorated, I suggest that schools are required to calculate on 2 factors instead of both. So I think we've addressed that now, but let's go to the example. A dependent 4th-year bachelor's degree student has 1 final semester of half-time enrollment remaining to complete their program of study in a credit-hour program where full-time enrollment is considered 24 credits. The institution has defined their academic year as 32 weeks, and the student is eligible for $7,500 as based on full-time enrollment for a full academic year. So current end of program proration required, attending less than full academic year, the proration is on credit hours, so the current proration formula will be 6 credits over 24. No, it will be 6 over whatever you consider the one term to be. So if that's 12, it would be 12. That fixes the issue. That's when I saw the light bulb moment for me, and I'm like, that's not right. Where did she get that? And we realized that we didn't quite have the reg text right. We had changed it, but for whatever happened in one of the iterations, it didn't get accepted, so. Okay, so that should clarify. We'll keep going. I like clarification, yes, for 1. On your second, new less than full-time enrollment yields the same result, 6 over 24, which we know is now 6 over 12.
So you're still working through the same scenario?
I went to the second one, the new less. So the first one, the current end of program, the proration, and you said 6 over 12, and 6 over 24, I said 6 over 12. The second, new less than full-time enrollment yields the same result, 6 over 12. I'm clarifying what you sent to us as the formula.
Okay.
Yes? Okay.
Apologies, Jenna, I saw your card was up and Tammy was already speaking. Were you trying to switch for this topic? Yes, you can, if Patty would like to come to the table for this topic. Thank you.
Patty Kohler,
If you could say your constituency, please.
private nonprofit.
Thank you.
So Patty, in your second, where you say, however, if both adjustments are required, the new less than full-time enrollment would yield eligibility of 1875, then is a second calculation required for the end of the program. There are 2 calculations here for a borrower who is in their last term that is less than a full academic year. But because you define what that full-time is for that period of enrollment, so if you are saying that would be 12 hours, then 12 hours would be full-time. The hours that student enrolls in, you would figure the calculation. You would not take a full academic year's full-time status for the respective borrower who is in a single term, their last term. It would be the one term, like it would be treated like a transfer, but it's not transfer. And we're not going to write additional language because the concept is still the same. So you just have to make sure that we're comparing apples to apples and not apples to oranges. The apples are full-time enrollment for the period that they're enrolled and the hours that they are taking in that period that they are enrolled. And that would always give you the right calculation. So in this case, if it is a true proration for a less than full academic year at their last term, you do have to figure out what the parameters are of that period of enrollment and what you consider full-time for that period of enrollment. Because it may not be the full 24. It may be considerably less. So those two provisions there before, or you can, however you do it, we figured it out, you really do come with the same answer if the formula is right. And in this case, using the period of time that they're enrolled as the full, that's the number of hours that you would use. You would not use the full academic year hours, but the period of enrollment hours that that is considered full-time, and get the reduction based on the number of hours they're taking compared to that, what is defined as full-time for that period of enrollment.
Patty?
So I think I get it.
Good. I'm glad.
I think it would be extremely helpful to walk through an example, and if we want to do that in a caucus, that would be fine.
Let's do that in a caucus.
Okay.
Okay, we are also at almost 10:30
So
and
let's
time
take
for
a
the
break. Let's take a break. And when Anne Marie tells us we can come back, because this is her show, not mine, sorry. And then we'll caucus after that.
We'll come back at 10:40, so it's a 12-minute break. If you could please be timely, I'd appreciate that.
Thank you, everyone.
Welcome back from the break, everyone. We have no cards up around the table, so I'm going to turn it back over to Tammy.
We would like to have a caucus with the institutions. We're going to go into the little back room. Just the institutions, please. Anyone who's impacted by the schedule of reductions, you might want to come because of your interaction with that. Okay.
We need to get the constituency groups then. So we have state agencies, private nonprofit, public, and proprietary institutions. Anyone else?
That should be it. And then the ed team, my ed team, and anyone else who wants to join for this fun conversation.
Thank you. And about how long?
I hope 10 minutes, but no more than 15. 10 minutes,
to
no more than
15.
15.
Okay.
15? Okay.
Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. We just concluded a caucus with the ed team and then the primary and alternate from 4 constituencies, state agencies, private nonprofit institutions, proprietary institutions, and public institutions. Tammy, would you like to do a report out?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We had received schedule of reduction questions, scenarios related to specific instances when a borrower attends enrollment less than a full-time status. We had indicated on our proposed regulatory text for a transfer student, which in essence is a 1 period of enrollment versus a full academic year. We have decided to change our language instead of saying transfer students, to include for any period less than a full academic year. This would be the calculation. And of course, by correcting the formula from what was there, because we did not realize we had kept the old formula instead of the new formula, that of course did exactly what I expected it to do, to clarify the actual reduction would be on the number of hours considered full-time for that less than full-time enrollment, less than a year enrollment, and then the hours that would be enrolled. We walked through a couple of different scenarios, and then we had a whiteboard and some markers, and Patty got to play teacher, and we drilled her on her knowledge as to how this would work. We also discussed the order of operations, and we made sure that the institutions were aware that we still have to look at all eligibility criteria first. You have to get the universe of what is the borrower eligible to receive, and none of that gets thrown out of the window. And so you have to make sure that when you're looking at the schedule of reductions, the first thing you're going to do is look at the cost of education. What is that cost of attendance going to be? And then if it's multiple loans, you have to apply the schedule of reductions to both loans or however many loans they have. So sub, unsub, and or plus, grad plus, whatever the case may be. And then you continue down to build out the award package, accounting for the period of enrollment less than full-time, what the school determines to be that full-time status. You would get that calculation for the reduction, you'd get that schedule of reductions, you'd apply it to each of the loan programs. You would add those remaining eligibility to that, and you would make sure that it stays under the cost of education. So we have full clarity. Everyone in the room really appreciated us adjusting the language. I'm not speaking for you all, but they seem to be happy with the way that we adjusted it and the way that we gave the actual formula, so that there's utter clarity now. So thank you, guys.
Does anyone who was not in the caucus have any questions?
I think we're done with schedule reductions. I know, I'm as happy as you are, I assure you. So is my team. So we can go on, Anne Marie, if you're ready.
And let's go on.
All right. So if we will pull up 685-209, we can go through the amendatory text there that we have provided based on all conversations and everything else we've talked about all morning. Give you guys a chance to get there. In your summary of changes, it's somewhere in there. It would be
Page 4.
Page 4. Thank you. All right. So are we ready? You guys good? Okay. So here we're talking about subparagraph B1. For purposes of this section, the following terms apply. Applicable amount means, and we have struck through our existing language, and we have added, oops, hold on, I went a little too fast. Oh, it's on the back side, sorry. We have a Romanet 1, a Romanet 2, and a Romanet 3. Romanet 1, for a borrower who is not a new borrower under the IBR plan, 15% of the result obtained by calculating on at least an annual basis the amount of the borrower's adjusted gross income and the borrower's spouse's adjusted gross income if married filing jointly that exceeds 150% of the poverty guideline. For a new borrower under the IBR plan, 10% of For a new borrower under the IBR plan, 10% of the result obtained by calculating on at least an annual basis the amount of the borrower's adjusted gross income and the borrower's spouse's adjusted gross income if married filing jointly that exceeds 150% of the poverty guideline. Or for any borrower under the pay plan, 10% of the result obtained by calculating on at least an annual basis the amount of the borrower's adjusted gross income and the borrower's spouse's adjusted gross income if married filing jointly that exceeds 150%. Poverty guideline. Of the poverty guideline. We didn't touch anything on 2. And so that's where we landed. That is a result of several of the proposals that we received to make sure that there was utter clarity that the pay plan is not 15%, but 10%, and that the new IBR plan is also, it's not really the new IBR, it's the new borrowers. Remember my red, white, and blue, it's the 10%. The next provision that we changed is under right before I, so that would be H, before it would be H4, I believe. I'm sorry, I thought we had one before this.
Nope.
We had one,
No.
didn't we have this right here for new hours under an IBR plan? 10%, except that the borrower must persist in excess of 10 years?
I don't think we added that.
Okay. All right, they're saying it's not new. I'm going to go on. They were emphatic too. Stop. Okay. Okay, I'm going to go to the summary because I can't find where we are right here. So we are in H4 Romanet 1. Under the repayment assistance plan, during all periods of repayment on all loans being repaid under the repayment assistance plan, the Secretary does not charge the borrower's account for any accrued interest that is not covered by the borrower's on-time payment of the amount due for that month. If a borrower's payment is credited to a future monthly payment and the payment equals or exceeds the on-time monthly payment amount made under the repayment assistance plan under subparagraph F5 Romanet 1 of this section, the Secretary charges the borrower's account any accrued interest that is not covered by the borrower's on-time payment of the amount due for that month in accordance with paragraph H, subparagraph, that should be subparagraph H for Romanet 1 of this section. So please insert the word sub in front of paragraph, please. Here is, we are talking about the provisions where there's interest subsidy, and right before we get to matchable principal. Under the repayment assistance plan, the key terms here are on-time full monthly payments, right? The amount of the payment due for that month. So under the repayment assistance plan, the baseline that we have to understand right now is that it requires a monthly amount due for that month on time. If a borrower prepays in advance, gives a lump sum, what happens to that payment is it is first applied to the interest and the fees, and then the rest goes to principal. We are required by regulations to advance the due date. But what happens with the amount of money that is left over after the monthly amount due for that month is left over, that gets applied to principal. It advances the due date. Under the repayment assistance plan, you have to have monthly on-time payments. When that additional amount of money gets applied to the principal, what happens is it advances the due date, but interest accrues in month two. So say you had a payment for 3 months. Interest accrues in month 2, interest accrues in month 3. You did not make an on-time monthly payment. You made a payment for the period of time that it was due, and the additional has gone to principal. You will not get the interest subsidy on month 2 and month 3 because you did not make an on-time, fully scheduled amount due for that month payment in the subsequent months.
Ashley.
Okay, I'm trying to follow your explanation, and I definitely listened intently. So you're saying that an early payment is not an on-time payment, and instead of applying to the next month too, it's a principal reduction? So they're not entitled to interest subsidy?
No, so I'm going to say it my way.
Okay.
Again, just because if we both get confused, we're going to be in a whole lot of trouble. So paying early, you are paying an amount of money that exceeds what you would owe for that month. That additional that exceeds what you owe for that month, we advance the due date. So say you've made a payment of $300 on a payment that's $100. You apply the $100 for month 1, that includes the interest and the fee, all that, $100. That extra $200 goes towards principal. We advance your due date from January, February to March, so April, you're doing April. April 1 comes around, month 2 and month 3, you've accrued interest on that loan, and so that is due. So you did not make a monthly payment in February and March. You made a payment in January that included money that went to principal, and that would advance your due date. So you get the interest subsidy for the month that you paid on time. Under WRAP, you have to pay monthly on-time payments for the full scheduled amount due for that month. You paid more, goes towards principal. You would not get interest subsidy for month 2 and month 3.
I guess it's hard for me to wrap my head around paying in advance or early is not considered on time.
We're sorry. No, I'm not being funny there. The reason, and I'm very intentional in what I'm saying here is we advance the due date per our regulations, right? So we're advancing the due date. It's not satisfying month 1, 2, and 3. It's not. It's going towards principal. So you're not making a prepayment for month 2 and 3. You are making an additional payment that is applied to principal. You may pay it early all you want, but that's going towards principal. It is not a monthly payment. Under WRAP, monthly, on time, scheduled amount due for that month payments in order for the interest subsidy to happen.
Alex Holt.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that I've this is a really complicated one, and I think so far, from what I understand, I think the department has struck the right balance here and got it right statutorily. We wouldn't. So first of all, I think just textually you have it right, but also from an incentive point of view, the interest forgiveness is really meant as a something to help the borrower along. You don't want to have a situation where the borrower is sort of gaming by paying forward the entire year and getting an interest subsidy that they don't necessarily need because they can pay it all at once. And there's also rules around how you have to charge, the secretary has to charge interest before a principal. So I think you've struck the right balance here. This makes sense to me.
And think of it in terms where if borrowers are struggling to pay their loans, And there are reasons that they could have extra money. Mommy and daddy could have given them money, grandma. I mean, there's lots of reasons why they could have extra money laying around, and they're doing such a great job of taking that extra money and applying it to their loans. But for the most part, for borrowers who are struggling, are they going to have a lot of extra money to pay towards future payment? I mean, so, you know, we're trying, again, as Alex points out, we're trying to strike the balance here. We've got to do what the statute tells us to do. And that statute tells us monthly on-time scheduled amount due payments. In our practices, our regulations already tell us that any advanced or prepayment changes the future due date. It advances the future due date.
Bob,
So does the statute say you can't pay early?
The statute says on-time payment.
Okay. And is it the department's opinion that current general understanding of law is that payments that are early are not, quote, on time?
Jacob,
Point of clarification, you can pay as much as you want on your loan at any time. We want you to pay off your loans. We want that principal, paid. There's no prepayment penalty. And I think that's an important point here. What we're saying is for the purposes of qualifying for the interest subsidy, on time means every month. You can't stack it so you can get,
Scheduled amount
right,
due.
the scheduled amount due. You can't stack it to basically try to game the interest subsidy or, beyond just gaming it, we don't want to also encourage an unsustainable approach to this. The entire idea of WRAP is to basically make scheduled monthly payments that are always the same, and you reward borrowers for doing that. You don't want to create a situation where borrowers are, again, either trying to game the system or stacking payments ahead of time to try to get an interest subsidy and setting themselves up for failure by disrupting the overall purpose of WRAP, which is consistent monthly payments.
On time monthly payments for the scheduled amount due.
Alex Ritchie. Al Shilley.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I take exception to the term gaming the system for borrowers who are simply paying ahead. And I also think paying ahead is on time. It's still very confusing how your rationale behind that. But I guess what I'm talking about more is like a borrower who has a, let's say, $10 monthly payment, who makes an early payment of $120, which would be their annual payment, not like a borrower who's paying like $5,000 up front or something like that. I just don't see how they would not, you're kind of de-incentivizing early payments or full payments in advance. And I don't see how that is in the public interest at all.
I do not believe I don't believe we're not incentivizing, we're not asking for that. What we're saying is for you to get the interest subsidy, you have to pay on time, monthly, full scheduled amount. In our regulations currently, not related to WRAP, but includes WRAP, whether it's early, prepayment, whatever the case may, whatever the terminology you want to use is, that advances a due date. If I am a borrower and I am paying my mortgage and I pay advance, I don't expect to pay my mortgage for 3 months and get a bill for interest after that. Sorry, I've paid 3 months ahead. That's not what we do. We advance the due date and we apply it to principal. So I understand that you take exception to it. I understand that you feel that we are not incentivizing borrowers. We're not telling them that they cannot pay. We're saying, sure, if you want to do that, great. It's going to pay down your principal. That is wonderful. That is going to help you in the long run anyway. Congratulations. What we are saying is you will not get an additional interest subsidy for the months where that payment amount has advanced the due date because you did not make it on time. And that's what the WRAP says, on time monthly payments for the full scheduled amount in order for you to get the interest subsidy.
And just to tack on to that, an early payment pays off principal, which reduces accrued interest. it's still in a borrower's interest to pay early and pay as much as they can to reduce the total principal amount. So again, I apologize if it came off as glib with, I said, gaming the system, but we also, we want borrowers to pay and we want borrowers to pay early, but we don't want them to set themselves up for failure and create some system where they're able to basically draw out the interest subsidy, because that doesn't help borrowers. It helps borrowers to pay off their principal and pay off their loans.
We are not accusing borrowers of gaming the system, but let's be clear. Any borrower, because this interest subsidy can apply to anyone, right? If you have a borrower who's going to pay large amounts on it and then get the interest subsidy attached onto that, that's considerably more than what you would get on a normal month to month. So you have to look at it from the perspective of, no, we're not trying to penalize anybody for paying ahead, but we're not going to give credit when the payments are supposed to be on time, due for that month, the scheduled amount. In order for you to get the interest subsidy, that's what the statute says, that's what the intent is for on-time payments. So that you, again, I'm going to say this, we do have this, the statute was written as, I believe it was, I can't remember if it was but it was written for distressed borrowers, right? Q. So at this point, if you want the interest subsidy, then you make your payments monthly on time for the full scheduled amount, and then you get the interest subsidy.
We're going to go to Alex Ritchie, then Alex Holt, and then back to Ashley.
I yield to Alex Holt because he has something relevant to this point, and then I've got another question.
I thank the gentleman from Maryland. Virginia? Oh, okay. It's one out of, it's close. I mean, I had a 50% chance. I just wanted to, so yeah, first of all, I don't think it's a disincentive because you are paying down principal with no prepayment penalty, which I think is a pretty unique benefit to the federal student loan program. But I also just want to say, as a matter of law, like the secretary, my understanding is, and Jake, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but my understanding is that the secretary must apply the payment first to interest. So you even separate from all these on-time things they're talking about, I don't really understand how the secretary could not apply it to principal, because if the secretary is allowing the principal subsidy in the next month, then the secretary isn't applying the payment to interest first, because the secretary is waiving some of the interest and applying the part of the payment to principal. So I just don't think it'd be legal, like separate from even this sort of statutory stuff they're talking about here.
Jacob, did you want to comment?
No notes. He can come up, take my position. That was good.
So back to Alex Ritchie and then Ashley.
Yeah, reclaiming my time. So I understand that paragraph H here is discussing interest, but my question, this just came out of the blue, Tammy, as you were going through your hypothetical. So I want to revisit that. For the borrower in January who paid for 3 months worth of payments, so covered February and March, so the next payment is due in April, right? But because of that advancement, does the borrower get credit towards the forgiveness time period for February and March?
My Batman says we don't know. Let me clarify that before we answer that.
Thank you.
That's a great question.
Can you repeat that question?
Yeah. So taking it out of this specific example, let's say you have a borrower who on time pays for that month and 2 additional months. So the way that this works, then their next payment is due that 3rd month out. I'm wondering if they get credit towards forgiveness, because you have to make 30 years worth of on-time payments. I'm wondering if they get credit for forgiveness towards that 30-year window for In this case that Tammy brought up, it was February and March, and their next payment was due in April.
So
mean
we need
early
2
for-
minutes from the department to clarify that answer. If we can't get it within the 2 minutes, we'll take it back and give it back after lunch.
You're gonna take 2 minutes right now, is that what you said?
Yep. You guys can continue talking. I'm just saying we're going to take 2 minutes Jake is going to try to flesh out the answer while you guys are talking.
I'm now thinking PSLF, and you can make lump sum payments for PSLF. Why is that any different?
I would encourage you at this moment to not reference PSLF. This is separate and apart from PSLF right now. This is about RAP and this is about this particular interest subsidy, and PSLF does not get an interest subsidy and it does not get a principal matching. So this is about a repayment plan, not a loan program that offers forgiveness. And so while you do get forgiveness under these repayment plans, I want to keep it in the confines of this repayment plan. Talk about it in the confines of this repayment plan. So under RAP, the question on the table is, if you make a prepayment, which is really not a prepayment because the interest is still not, we've got to look at this under the repayment assistance plan. Does an additional payment over that exceeds the monthly amount that is due is submitted to the department on time for month 1, do the months that the other amounts of the payment apply to, which it really doesn't because it goes towards principal. So we need to get clarification if that would be considered a qualifying time toward forgiveness as a prepayment that advances the due date. Separate and apart from the interest subsidy.
So separate from PSLF, do we know how it works with IBR right now? If you make a lump sum payment,
Eric?
that counts towards forgiveness?
For IBR, if you make a lump sum payment, don't the regs allow it to, what do we allow it to do? For IBR. We're not talking about PSLF right now.
So under the enjoined regs.
Oh, here we go. Right. No, you're right. Exactly.
No,
Yeah.
under the enjoined regs, right, that changed how we apply payments, and it allowed for delinquent, Renee, I'm going to use the term catch up. If a borrower's delinquent and is catching up on their delinquency with a lump sum payment, then those prior months under the enjoined regs would count towards IBR forgiveness. If they're paying in advance, those would also count as the month is achieved up through the next certification date. They could.
Eric, is that second part is separate from the enjoined regs, correct? That was already the case before the enjoined regs, that if you make a prepayment under IBR.
Sort of. I have to be a little careful with the PSLF rules around. I just want to be careful.
Yep. Not PSLF, non-PSLF.
I know, but we've made a concerted effort to
marry the two,
to not treat either program differently from a payment perspective. So now with part of the rules being enjoined, some of them not being enjoined, us negotiating these, and there's a lot to parse out. In fact, Renee will tell you, I was a little short with him earlier. Like I don't know how to answer some of these questions until we start parsing out where all these payments are going to apply and not apply.
The moral of the story is stay tuned. We're going to take it back. We're going to flesh it out with everybody and come back with the answers. Again, I just want to level set expectations that this is separate and apart from the interest subsidy. Like this is a separate, it's something that has morphed into questions about counting toward time to forgiveness, but this is separate and apart from getting the interest subsidy because we know that has to be an on-time monthly payment for RAP. I think we can go on. Oh, I'm sorry, another.
Deborah?
Apologies, I do have a question about the interest subsidy. So extending upon your example where the student has a $100 monthly payment, they pay $300, understanding they would not get credit for months 2 and 3 because they did not make a monthly payment. What if they do make a monthly payment during months 2 and 3? Does the subsidy then apply?
That depends on if it's the on-time monthly payment for the amount due for that month. So if they make it when it's due for that month, that's separate and apart from them giving a $300 payment in month 1.
Right.
So if they pay month 2, they pay month 3.
But then they would get the interest subsidy for months 2 and 3 if they make an additional on-time monthly payment during those months.
Well, it's not an additional, if they make their on-time monthly payment for the scheduled amount on month 2 and month 3's due date, yes. Yes, it doesn't take away from them making payments on month 2 and month 3. It advanced the due date, but they still are making that scheduled monthly payment for say February 5th. They make it on February 5th, they make it on March 5th. I believe that payment would be looking at the interest that is due, because it would apply to interest first, and it would apply the interest subsidy for those subsequent for the month that they're making the payment on, because they're making another payment.
Right.
So the first month they give $300, they owe $100, $200 has gone towards principal, it's advanced the due date.
Mhm.
But it didn't really change the monthly due, it didn't really change the amount due for February and March. Huh? Is that not right?
That was my understanding. I just wanted to clarify and make sure that I understood.
Erica, do I have that right or am I wrong on that? Eric, do you want to come sit up here?
Not with that nameplate in front of me. So I think depending on the daily interest accrual, right, that the future payment amount the payment amount wouldn't change, just more would go to principal and less would go to interest if they paid down the principal for the future interest accrual. Yeah. Sorry, I have to say that out loud to.
So I just want to clarify what you said. So basically, we should think of that then as a lump sum payment that reduced the principal, and then the new interest accrual is recalculated. The monthly payment hasn't changed because it's set based on the year. Now, there's a separate question about what happens if the following month you've recertified and you have a new payment, but I think that's treated differently.
Right,
correct?
we would never allow you to achieve credit beyond the certification date. Everything would just be a principal reduction, and then for forgiveness purposes, we would not give you any credit until we recalculate, and then you have to make another lump sum payment in order for future to.
And so then my final question related to what Deborah asked is, if you've made the lump sum payment, you get the credit for you advance the due date by 2 months, right? But then you make the on-time payments. Is your due date still advanced by 2 months?
The borrower can request that the due date is not advanced. If the borrower, and my understanding based upon what we've talking about is if the borrower requests for they make that principal only payment, they request for the due date not to advance, then they make their next regular payment, then they would be entitled to the principal matching our interest subsidy. But regulations say that we default to advancing, so borrower has to actually request that we not advance.
Okay. All right. So we are going to move on because it is getting close to lunchtime. Okay, we'll do that in a second.
Sorry.
Because it's going to come up again.
Well, I know, that's what it was just gonna.
All right.
We were gonna pick it.
So in K8, Romanet 1, C5. Oh, can we put our reg text back up? Thank you. We have removed, we say prior to July 1, 2028, a monthly payment we have put the authority of an income contingent repayment plan under this section of not less than monthly payment required under the applicable plan, including the minimum payment permitted under such plan. So we have made sure that we did not inappropriately identify that it was the authority of an income contingent repayment plan. Now we go to O2, Romanet 1, matching principal. And I'm sure you guys know where we're going here. Under the repayment assistance plan, when the borrower is not in a period of deferment under 685-204 or forbearance under section 685-205, for each month the borrower makes an on-time monthly payment as applied in paragraph F5, Romanet 1 of this section, and the outstanding principal is reduced by less than $50, the secretary reduces such total outstanding principal of the borrower by an amount that is equal to, and we have restructured the paragraphs from Romanet 1 to capital A, Romanet, Arabic 1, 2, and capital B. And then Romanet 2, if a borrower's payment is credited to a future monthly payment and the payment equals or exceeds the monthly repayment amount made under F5 Romanet 1 of this section, the secretary does not provide the borrower a matching principal payment in accordance with paragraph 2, Romanet 1, O2, Romanet 1 of this section. And Jake had something to say.
Yeah, on the forgiveness question, I apologize, sorry. Before you allowed us to take a quick break to look at that, we think we have the answer, but we want to circle a little bit over lunch and give a more complete explanation of it. We've looked at the statute, we've got, there, but we want to fully be able to present that to you, if you'll indulge us.
Ashley?
So just so we're clear, you're applying the same quote unquote logic to the interest subsidy as you are to the principal matching. So a borrower who makes an early or advanced payment does not get the interest subsidy or the principal matching reduction. Is that correct?
1 second.
Okay.
Ashley, I apologize. Would you please ask your question again?
Yep, sure. I'm just trying to make sure I understand this. So in this section, the borrower who makes an advanced payment, so an early payment, does not get the benefit of the principal reduction.
Right. If you look at Romanet 2, if a borrower's payment is credited to a future monthly payment and the payment equals or exceeds the monthly repayment amount, they would not get the principal matching. And I believe we are going to check with one of our other attorneys to see if we need to add the exact same language that we added under interest subsidy, where we say for each month, the on-time payment amount due for that month. So we might be tweaking this, huh?
Okay.
We can still talk about this until we get confirmation on that. The same philosophy applies here as did with interest subsidy. The same, it advances the due date. We know that an extra payment goes towards principal, and so they would not get principal matching for a payment amount that is credited or that exceeds the amount that is due for that month. It's the same concept.
Okay.
And if we can't get that clarification prior to lunch, we'll circle back after. Okay. I think if we don't have any additional questions, that we are ready for.
I believe Ashley has one
Can
more
I just
question.
a minute, please? Okay, I kind of have a hypothetical to pose if the department is willing to consider this.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Hold on, can you wait for Jake? to
Yes,
come back?
absolutely.
Sorry. I need his ears.
Jacob, I need your law school hypothetical ears.
Please don't do that to me.
Okay, so here's a situation that I would like clarity on. So if a borrower owes $100 a month, in January they make a $300 payment, and by default, the next payment due date is advanced to April, and the extra $200 is applied to principal and or any outstanding interest or fees. The borrower doesn't realize the payment due date has been advanced or doesn't understand this, and makes otherwise on-time monthly $100 payments in February and March. Does the borrower not get any interest subsidy for February, March, despite having both made prepayments to cover those months and made additional full-time payments in each of those months?
So the interest subsidy is only for on-time monthly payments that are for the full scheduled amount. You said interest subsidy, so I'm answering that specific question is no, they would not. We just discussed the interest subsidy. Well, wait a minute. They made this still.
Yeah.
Based on what we answered the last time, that is considered an on-time monthly payment. It's not considered, okay, hold on.
Yeah, this isn't, we want to let Eric answer this one.
We want to let Batman answer
Yeah,
this one.
Yeah, we might want to chat some about this in the room, but
And why don't we not answer that until we come back? Because I'd like
Yeah.
for all of us to be on the same page, and I don't feel like we are, and I'd rather us have a unified voice and position on this. Sure, thanks.
That would be very helpful. Any technical hypotheticals, please put in an email. We would like to be able to go through them in detail, and we don't want to ever appear scattered or have to go take back anything that we say to offer corrections. So if you guys can write them out for us, especially if they involve some nuance, it's very, very helpful for us.
I think at this point, we can go ahead and conclude for lunch if that's okay. And if you could give us an extra 15 minutes at lunch, because I understand it's going to take us a few minutes to discuss some of these things.
Yes.
Thank you.
So we will break for lunch. We will return at 1:15.